Welcome back, Shadowverse peeps, to another Evolve video. And first things first, thank you so much for checking out the first one. So I try my best to kind of have as much of a broad, general presentation of the deck lists that were presented. And quite a few of you also left several comments, leaving your own builds or your own takes on how to build for some of the classes, which I'm really appreciated for. And hope that in the future people can come back to videos like that and, submit their own lists and also review the ones that were shown in the video as well. And we can have a nice little deck list forum down there as well. But today, as we're slowly approaching the set 2 release date, I think it's important to look at which cards from set 1 you really need to have before we get into the future sets, because there's actually quite a few, since here in Japan we are currently on set 6 of the game, and even to this very day there are still some cards in set 1 that are used to this very day. So in this video we're going to take a look at all the different cards for every single class that you must get. The ones that we do not mention, of course, doesn't necessarily mean that you don't need them, but I'm specifically looking more at a long-term perspective, starting from long-term in terms of set 2, going all the way to long-term in terms of set 6. So these will be cards that you're going to be using from set 2 and onwards. That being said, even if there's cards that are really strong in set 1 that aren't necessarily used as much, if you have tournaments coming up and things like that that you want to focus on, you definitely need to pick up those as well. So it all depends on how you basically just settle your priorities, right? At the end of the day, we all enjoy card games in our own ways, but this is just to kind of help you make sure that you have everything going forward. We're going to start off with the neutrals, and for the neutrals we have the golds to particularly look at. And here, I know, a lot of you have been asking this question, will I need Bellringer in the future? And I'm here to say that yes, we still play Bellringer at 3 in so many decks, even a year later down the line. Bellringer Angel just offers something that no other deck really has, no other class really has, in being a 1-cost ward that draws you cards, and on Evo also damages the board from early aggro. So stopping that early aggro while drawing you cards is so important, because some decks that don't have early card draw just don't have any other ways to get advantage, right? Don't have other ways to find cards that they need into the middle and late game. So Bellringer Angel, I really recommend picking up. Either, open boxes and, get them from packs, or, if your local game store sells them as singles, that is also an option. But I would recommend getting 3 of the normal one and 1 of the Evolve form. Now, the reason why is because the 1 drop as a 0/2 ward with last word's draw card is always going to be good, but sometimes in more aggressive metas, you want to play 1 of the Evolve one as well, just to be able to take out your opponent's early followers as well, where you play Bellringer, don't ward it, and the next turn after your opponent plays something like a 1-cost 2/2, you evolve into it and get rid of it, and then you can ward up to stop any other aggression. The other neutral gold card that I recommend picking up now is Erd. So Erd I've talked about before as well, and she's just a really important way to take care of your opponent's board in terms of just getting rid of annoying cards that are you don't have other ways to deal with, right? If you don't have spells that take care of them, or you don't have ways to attack into them, Erd will take care of it, right? So I would recommend maybe getting 2 to 3 of her normal version. I think if you want to be safe, I would get 3, but most decks usually play around 2, and then 1 copy of her post-evolved version. So the reason why we play 1 of the evolved copies is just because sometimes it's enough to just push your opponent's card, their follower, into the EX area, because this is an evolved card, then the evolved card will go back to the Evo deck anyway, so they're just stuck with the unevolved body in the EX area that you kind of force them to replay, so they kind of wasted whatever amount of play points that they spent on it, and that's already pretty good. So I'd say 2 to 3 of the normal one and 1 of the evolved copy for Erd. As for silver cards, there is 1 spell that we've talked about a lot, which is Execution. This not only allows you to take care of your opponent's followers, but it also takes out amulets, and this is going to be really important in upcoming formats, even in set 2. So I would say, it's a silver. I would expect you to pick up 2 or 3 copies. 3 just to be safe, I think, is a good number. Then we have Trail of Light. Now, Trail of Light is not necessarily super generic, but if you play anything like Runecraft or Dragoncraft, you're gonna want to have it, because both of those decks will be using it. Runecraft because it has ways to discard cards, or if you overdraw, you can discard at the end of turn and then keep drawing and overdrawing and, discarding and filling up your cemetery with spells. But in Dragon, we're gonna get a lot of discard synergy in the future as well, and it's gonna work really well. Then for bronzes, they're pretty simple. I would say pick up 3 goblins. Goblin is just a generic, 1-cost beater, but some decks in set 3, there's gonna be a Havencraft build that wants to play the goblin. So I'd say pick up 3. Usually it's pretty easy to come by, and it's, just a cheap bronze card. And Angelic Snipe. Angelic Snipe is also a good card to have at 3 copies, simply because in more aggressive metas, sometimes the Angelic Snipe will be the tech that you need to beat some of your opponent's cards. In the future, there will be cards that are 5/2 with Storm Storm, but Angelic Snipe can take care of it, so you don't have to eat 5 Storm damage. Up next, we have Forestcraft. So for Forestcraft, I think the legendary that you should really pick up right now is Ancient Elf. So Ancient Elf is going to be used for a very long time. Let's face it, it's a ward, it bounces cards, it gains stats, technically 2 bounces in 1 card, which is really strong. Ancient Elf will be used for quite a while, so definitely do recommend you pick it up. I would say get 3 copies of the normal one and 2 copies of the Evolved version. Then for the golds, I would say Rhinoceroach is going to be used here and there, but it will be coming back in the future too, and is already used quite a bit now too. I'd say 3 copies of the normal Rhinoceroach and 2 of the Evolved form should be quite safe. And then Silverbolt. Silverbolt is a really good spell, which is also a gold. Highly recommend getting 2 to 3 of it because it's sometimes your actual win con card in Forest, and there'll be quite a lot of formats in the future where it will be used. We have quite a lot of things to go over in the silvers for Forest though, because there's a lot of good stuff in set 1. Elven Princess Mage is of course like the floral fencer for Forestcraft. Being this good token generator is, you know, it's not that many cards can do it as well as she does. So I would say get 3 copies of her normal version and 2 of her Evolved version. Blessed Fairy Dancer is going to be very important both now and in the future, so this is another silver I recommend getting 3 copies of. Elfchild May, anytime that Swordcraft is meta, will be the #1 card you're going to rely on, so you definitely want to have 3 copies. She will be seen quite a lot too. Nature's Guidance, one of the best bouncing spells that there is, basically has been used not just in Shadowverse Evolve, but even in the app version of Shadowverse since like inception, so it's just one of those cards that again, you'll probably always be using, and again, good to have at 3. And Harvest Festival is another interesting card that kind of sees play here and there, but it definitely does see more play in the future. And I would say just in case, pick up 3. It's a good amulet. It kind of helps you recover, helps you also find cards. So I think it's pretty good. And finally for the bronzes, we have Archer, who of course the same logic as the Elfchild May is really good in these like sword metas or board-based metas. So I'd say 3 normals, 2 evos. It's going to be used for a long time. Anytime we have a board-based meta that isn't just like dragon having 1 big attacker that's punching you in the face, it's going to be pretty good. Fairy Whisperer is another good token generator that I think it's good to pick up at 3, you know, as a bronze I think it should be pretty easy to sort out. And finally Fairy Circle, also 3 copies, a very good card for token-based Forestcraft decks. Moving on to Swordcraft, a legendary that will see use for a very long time is Aurelia Regal Saber. I mean, we've talked about her in the previous video too, but just an incredible card, right? Huge stat stick, has ward, has aura, can take out your opponent's followers even if they're not engaged. Just amazing overall. So I would say 2 copies is gonna be enough for the most part. If you really want to play it safe, I would get 3, but honestly in a lot of my lists, even past set 1, I usually ran about 2 just because it's not like a central piece of the deck, it's just a really good card to have in some of the formats. Maid Leader though, oh my god, you're going to be using Maid Leader forever. Maid Leader is a very important silver card. Pick up 3 normal ones, 2 of the Evolved copies. Even if you don't run the 2 Evolved copies and just like 1 or something, she's just really good. She's really good in kind of like being the glue that finds you the cards you really want, whether it's Floral Fencer or other cards that come out in the future. Gemstaff Commander, same logic. Like, she finds any Swordcraft follower. That only means that the more good Swordcraft cards come out, the more good targets she can find. So without any comment, 3 copies, absolutely. And finally, Swordsman. Swordsman is a card you might not be playing right now, and it might seem to you like, whoa, I mean, this dude just, you know, engages one of my opponent's followers. What's so great about it? Very important. In set 2, you're gonna need to engage your opponent's followers in order to trade your own card that is called Leonidas, which summons a very powerful amulet. We'll talk about that more when we start to get into the set 2 content, but Swordsman is a very key part of that deck, so you really want to have 3 copies. And then 2 more bronzes that you really want to have for Swordcraft at 3 of each are Luminous Knight as well as Novice Trooper. These will be used for a long time as good aggressive pieces, so you definitely want to pick them up at 3 each. Moving on to Runecraft, and the legendary that I definitely recommend everyone to pick up is Merlin. Merlin searches for any spell. I mean, it's the same logic as Gemstaff Commander, right? The more good spells Rune gets, the better this is gonna get. And on Evo, you can replay one of your low-cost spells too. I would say you definitely want to have 3 of the normal one, 2 at minimum of the Evolve copy, but if you cannot pick up 3, like I think 3, there are so many Rune decks where you just don't run that much in the Evolve deck, so just having the 3 Merlins for, you know, to evolve into is really good. So I would highly recommend to pick up 3 just for the long term. Like, she is going to be very important in the future and you don't want to miss out on it. And speaking of important for the future, Dimension Shift, the gold card that gives you an extra turn. You know, you might be thinking like, oh man, sometimes I really don't manage to land the Dimension Shift. Trust me, in the future, the more good low cost spells there are, the easier it is to fill up that 15 cards in your cemetery, and that only makes Dimension Shift better. So pick up, I would say 3 copies. You're going to be playing 3 usually when you do play Dimension Shift, so just in case, I would say get 3. Now for the silvers, I would say Flame Destroyer is something you can pick up at 2, maybe 3 if you really want to be safe on it, but as time goes on, we kind of play less copies of Flame Destroyer just because Runecraft gets better ways to just put down big attackers on the board without necessarily having to wait so long as Flame Destroyer forces you to. So I think 2 copies honestly is enough, and another really good silver is Fate's Hand. So Fate's Hand, I mean, just an amazing draw card. Pick up 3, you're going to use it anytime you use Spell Chain. Now in the bronzes is where a lot of like those really good Earthright cards are found, and you know, Earthright is actually quite nice in the early sets. So cards like Runic Guardian, you can pick up as a 3-of just because they're kind of generically nice Earthright cards. Crafty Warlock, I would say pick up 3 copies of the regular version, 2 copies of the Evolve version because it is just another good generator. Alchemist's Workshop kind of works under that same logic. I would say probably pick up 3 copies. And Teachings of Creation as well is basically just a good stack card, really cheap as well. So I would pick up 3 copies of that one too, just in case if you are interested in playing Earthright. But if you're more on the spell chain side of things, then I would say picking up Wind Blast is pretty good. Wind Blast is not as amazing as you might think it is, but it's still a card that's going to be played. I would say 2 copies is probably enough, but 3 just in case is also fine. Sometimes you look at Wind Blast and you really wish it had Quick written on it. I feel like that would make it really good, and probably a more expensive cost too. But then Sorcery Cache is the one that you definitely need to pick up at 3 copies because this is a really good cheap spell that helps you just find other good spells. So definitely recommend it at 3. Moving on to Dragoncraft, and here I know, you've also been asking about this one. Is Forte the best attacker ever made for Dragoncraft? And yes, it is. Dragoncraft still has not found a better attacker than Forte. She is the only thing in the whole class pool right now that says 7/3 Storm with Aura. The fact that you can confirm 7 damage unless they have like big AoE spells that lower your attack or take out your followers in an AoE fashion with a quick on it, you're gonna be safe because she cannot be targeted, so that 7 damage is gonna land in the face. And so Forte, 3 copies of the regular one, 2 of the evolved one. I think usually you're fine, like if you draw the 3rd and you've already evolved twice, just 5 damage to face. If they have 0 play points, chances are there's no Angelic Snipe to take her out. So 3-2 should be a fine ratio. Then for golds, Genesis Dragon, I would say having like 2 copies of Genesis Dragon is good for the early times. So some of these earlier sets, it is still a really good attacker just to use, you know, 10 damage to face is nothing to scoff at. Shapeshifting Mage is a card that is used for quite a bit because of his easy cost and Bane. So 3 of the normal copy, 2 of the evolved copies I think would be pretty smart. And finally, Ayala Dragon Knight is another way to ramp up your play points outside of using the Oracle. So I'd say pick up 3 copies of Ayala as well. Of course, as better ramp options come out in the future, you know, these cards will be, you know, changed up here and there. But for now, they're definitely very good. For the silvers, Wyvern Cavalier is pretty good. You know, just a nice card to help you accelerate your board. I'd say 3 copies. Again, it's a silver, so it should be relatively easy to find. Shenlong is a very important card and one of the best in Dragon. Draws cards, has discard synergy, and also heals your leader very importantly. So I would say pick up 3 copies of the normal one, 2 of the evolved form. And then we have some really good spells in the silvers for Dragoncraft. So things like Conflagration, I would say you don't really play at 3 necessarily that often, but I think like 2 or 3 is a good amount to pick up just for those very board-based metas. And then Serpent Wrath is an easy 3 of because this is a huge ping to one of your opponent's followers while drawing you cards. So that's also very important. And finally for the bronzes, not too much here. We have Fire Lizard, which is good as a low cost follower to just have on the board while taking out your opponent's stuff. So I'd say maybe pick up 3 copies of that one. And finally Blazing Breath, arguably the best low cost spell that Dragon has. You want to play 3 copies of that because it's your only way to really have something that's kind of like an Angel Snipe in Dragoncraft that only gets buffed once you get to Overflow. And now we're down to our last 2 classes. So Abysscraft, I would say that Cerberus is kind of that must-have pickup. She generates really important tokens that basically help you to balance out your mid game. And even a year later, she still sees use just because of how versatile she is. So I would say pick up 3 copies of the normal one, 2 of the evolved form, just to be safe. I feel like that kind of goes for a lot of these really good legendaries too. That kind of like 3-2 ratio. As for golds, Dire Bond. Dire Bond is really good. In the app, people, every time that Dire Bond gets somewhat reprinted in some form, people always rejoice. And in Shadowverse Evolve, Dire Bond is just as good. And it's a 1 cost, you know, helps you fulfill your conditions and gets you card advantage. Everybody likes that. So Dire Bond is an easy 3 of, I definitely recommend picking it it up. Praise Executioner is our first silver I'm going to recommend. It's a cool card, forces that discard, and it's going to be used for quite a bit if you want to embrace that discard strategy. So I would say like a 3-3 ratio or a 3-2 ratio is pretty safe between the normal and the evolved copy. Dark General is just good for the aggro version of Abysscraft, so I think Dark General should be picked up as a 3 of. Soul Conversion is one of the very important ways to draw cards in Abysscraft, so that's another 3 of that I recommend picking up. And Phantom Howl. Phantom Howl is pretty cool. Again, good for aggro. You can just summon a bunch of ghost tokens and go face and punch your opponent, and so winning games fast is pretty good, so I would say Phantom Howl 3 is also another pretty self-explanatory one. Then for bronzes, we have Skeleton Fighter, just a good stat stick that I think you're going to be appreciating to have on the board in a lot of the future builds to come too. So 3 copies there. Ambling Wraith, same thing, 3 copies as well, just a good aggressive card. Spartoy Sergeant is another card that's really good if you want to go for that Necro Charge game plan as well, so I'd say 3 copies if you're aiming towards that. And finally, Razor Claw, of course, still used to this day in the app version and hasn't really been changed in Evolve, so of course, getting that 3 damage to face is always going to feel pretty nice, especially as a game ender. So I'd say, just like 3 damage, 3 copies of Razor Claw. And now finally, Havencraft. So Havencraft, we have Jeanne d'Arc as the representative legendary that sticks around for a long time. Just being a good board wiper, right? I mean, if you go the full commit with the evolve on her, she usually does 4 damage to all your opponent's followers, buffs up your followers too, so it's just a good to have in board-based metas. So I would say 3 copies of the normal one, 2 to 3 of the Evo one. I feel like I've said this for all of the classes legendary so far. And then we have a very good generic spell in Themis' Decree. It's played at 3 sometimes, but I honestly feel like 2 is kind of enough at times too, because Themis' Decree is really good in being a board wipe, but it does kind of eat up your whole turn because it's 6 cost. So I'd say 3 if you want to feel safe about it, but I think 2 is also enough. And then Sacred Plea is a card I really want you to pick up as a 3 of, because it's kind of that cheap amulet for Havencraft that helps you draw more cards and find your pieces. So for that reason, it is very nice. For the silvers, we have Prism Priestess. So this one I recommend as a 3-2 as well. So 3 of the normal, 2 of the Evo. Same as Main Leader. It finds you important cards in your deck. Any amulet-based Havencraft deck is going to want it, so I definitely recommend it. Then we have 2 good quick spells. First one is Blackened Scripture. This one is really nice. It just banishes your opponent's followers, so it doesn't activate Last Words because they get banished. So I'd say pick up 3 of that, and then 3 copies of Dark Offering, so that when your opponent tries to trade one of your followers, you go, psych, I'm gonna get rid of it myself and draw some cards, get some life back, and just feel good about myself. And it's also cheap cost too, so I'd say get 3 Dark Offering as well. And finally, for the bronzes here are definitely where I would say the majority of like this will be good later cards are in. If I tell you right now that you need to have Mine You, you're probably gonna go like, why would I need Mine You? Mine You being a 2-2 with Aura, and then on Evolve 3-3 with Aura. Doesn't even have Ward, right? Why would I need to take care of something with Aura? Well, in the future, we will have formats where, you know, we're gonna have some decks that target the opponent's followers a little bit too much, and therefore they're gonna struggle to deal with Aura, and you're not gonna want to not have Mine You when it comes to that time. So while Mine You doesn't really cost anything, you want to pick up 3 copies of the regular, 2 of the Evo. Just the regular is really important. Just having a 2 cost 2-2 with Aura is important in that one specific format, and quite a lot of Haven lists will find space for that Mine You too. Snake Priestess is probably the same thing. A 1 cost 1-3 with Ward. Like, okay, sure, but it's not Bellring, it doesn't draw me cards. But there's gonna be a Ward-based Haven deck in the future, and you don't want to miss out on Snake Priestess either. Death Sentence is more like a card that's actually running Haven right now that I think you should again pick up as a 3 of. Same goes for Snake Priestess, by the way, also a 3 of. But the final card is also one that I think is also going to be very good, and especially set 2, which is Guardian Sun. You give one of your followers Ward, and you're going to give that to a very powerful follower called Heavenly Aegis in the future, which just kind of settles the game for you, and your opponent just kind of looks at it and goes, well, I can't do anything. I would say 2 copies of Guardian Sun is usually enough, and that's usually how much lists played, but 3 if you want to feel safe is also fine. And that is it. So those are all of the must-have cards from set 1, and there are a lot. So much of this set ages like fine wine, and you should definitely invest in it. Of course, again, I'll repeat that even though there are some cards not mentioned here, that doesn't mean that they're bad or that you shouldn't have them. These are just really thinking about the next, you know, like set 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you know, just really looking at the long term of the game. Cards that will continue to see play even a year down the line. But with that, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.